The afternoon sun streams through the floor-to-ceiling windows of Richard Blackwood's study, casting long shadows across the mahogany desk where Maria Santos carefully dusts each surface. At 35, her weathered hands move with practiced precision, years of cleaning wealthy homes having taught her to be invisible, efficient, and thorough. She approaches the massive safe in the corner, its heavy door hanging wide open like a mouth revealing its secrets. Inside, stacks of crisp $100 bills sit neatly bundled $50,000 in cash, alongside important-looking documents and jewelry. Maria's eyes widen slightly, but she doesn't pause. She's seen wealth before, and she knows better than to linger. Carefully, she closes the safe door with a soft click and continues her work, moving to dust the leather-bound books that line the walls. The study door bursts open with such force that Maria jumps, nearly dropping her cleaning cloth. Richard Blackwood strides in, his face twisted with fury, followed closely by his perfectly coiffed wife Sarah and their college-aged son David. At 52, Richard carries himself with the arrogance of a man who's never been told no, his expensive suit doing little to hide the cruelty in his pale blue eyes. "I knew it," he shouts, pointing an accusatory finger at Maria. "I knew you people couldn't resist. Where is it? Where's my money?" His voice echoes off the walls, startling Maria so badly that she stumbles backward, her heart racing. I don't understand, Mr. Blackwood," Maria stammers, her slight accent becoming more pronounced under stress. "What money?" Sarah steps forward, her diamond jewelry catching the light as she gestures dramatically. "Don't play innocent with us. We know exactly what kind of person you are. People like you always take what doesn't belong to you." Richard's face grows redder with each word. $50,000 was in that safe, and now it's gone. You were the only one in here. He pulls out his phone, already dialing. "I'm calling the police right now. You're going to jail, and I'm going to make sure everyone knows what you really are." "Please, Mr. Blackwood," Maria pleads, her voice steady despite her trembling hands. "I didn't take anything from you. I closed the safe because it was open, but I never touched what was inside." Richard laughs, a harsh sound devoid of any warmth. "Closed it? You mean after you helped yourself to my money? Do you think I'm stupid? I've dealt with people like you before." His eyes narrow as he continues dialing. 8 years ago, I had to fire one of your kind, a lying, cheating engineer who tried to steal from my company. Now his wife comes here to finish what he started." The room falls silent except for the sound of Richard's breathing. Maria's face goes pale, but before she can respond, David's sharp intake of breath cuts through the tension. His eyes are fixed on something that's partially visible from Maria's worn leather purse, the corner of a framed certificate that caught the light just right. David squints, trying to read the embossed lettering, and his expression shifts from contempt to confusion. The words, Harvard Business School, are clearly visible, along with what appears to be the name Maria Santos in elegant script. Richard notices his son's distraction and grows even more agitated. "What are you staring at? Help me deal with this thief." But David remains frozen, his mind racing as he processes what he's seeing. Could their housekeeper really have a degree from Harvard? Maria catches David's stare and quickly adjusts her purse, but it's too late. She straightens her shoulders, and for just a moment, something flickers in her eyes. Not the fear of a cornered thief, but the quiet dignity of someone who's endured far worse than false accusations. "Mr. Blackwood," she says quietly, "I've worked for your family for 2 years. I've never taken so much as a paperclip from this house. But if you're determined to destroy me, I won't stop you." She begins gathering her cleaning supplies, her movements deliberate and calm despite the chaos erupting around her. The police sirens can already be heard in the distance as Richard continues his tirade, but Maria Santos walks toward the door with her head held high, clutching that worn leather purse a little tighter than usual. Maria's small apartment in the working-class neighborhood feels even more cramped tonight, filled with the weight of unspoken fears. The second-hand furniture and faded wallpaper tell the story of a family making do with very little, but the space radiates warmth and love despite its limitations. In the tiny kitchen, 16-year-old Isabella Santos helps her grandmother Rosa prepare dinner, their worried glances toward the living room betraying their anxiety. Rosa Delgado, at 75, carries herself with the quiet grace of a woman who's weathered many storms. Her silver hair is pulled back in a neat bun, and though her hands shake slightly from her heart condition, her dark eyes remain sharp and kind. She was a teacher back in Mexico for 40 years, before coming to America to help raise Isabella, and wisdom lines every word she speaks. "Mija," Rosa says softly to Isabella, "your mother has been through worse than this. She's stronger than she knows." Isabella, whose intelligent eyes mirror her mother's determination, sets down the wooden spoon she's been stirring with. "But abuela, what if they really arrest her? What if people believe Mr. Blackwood?" Her voice cracks slightly, the weight of being the family's translator and bridge to American culture showing on her young shoulders. Rosa takes her granddaughter's hand, her touch gentle but firm. "La dignidad no se compra con dinero," she whispers. "Dignity cannot be bought with money. Your mother knows this, even when the world tries to make her forget." Maria finally emerges from her bedroom, having changed out of her work clothes into a simple sundress. But she's carrying that worn leather purse with unusual care, almost cradling it against her chest. The bag has seen better days. The brown leather is cracked and worn smooth in places from years of use, but it's clean and well-maintained, clearly precious to its owner. "Isabella, Rosa," Maria says, settling onto the couch between them. "We need to talk." Her voice is steadier now, away from Richard's accusations and surrounded by the people who truly know her heart. Isabella immediately notices the way her mother holds the purse. "Mom, what's in there? You've been carrying that bag differently since you came home." Maria's fingers trace the leather handles, and for a moment, her composed facade cracks. "This bag contains the life we used to have, Mija. The life before." She pauses, looking at Rosa for strength. "Before your father died," Rosa finishes gently. The silence stretches between them as Maria slowly opens the purse. Inside, carefully preserved in protective sleeves, are documents that tell a very different story than the one Richard Blackwood has been spreading. First, she pulls out a master's degree from Harvard Business School, the heavy paper and embossed seal, proclaiming Maria Elena Santos as a graduate with highest honors. Isabella's eyes widen. "Mom, you never told me you went to Harvard." "There's more," Maria says quietly, producing a certified public accountant license, various professional certifications, and finally, a letter written in Spanish in a man's careful handwriting. "This is from your father, Isabella. He wrote it just before he died." Isabella's hands shake as she takes the letter, reading aloud. "Mi amor, if something happens to me, remember la verdad siempre sale a la luz. The truth always comes to light. You are stronger than you know, and someday you'll need that strength to fight for what's right." Beneath the letter is a thick folder labeled Blackwood Engineering, safety violations in Carlos Santos's neat engineering script. Maria's hands tremble as she shows them Carlos's final work documents, filled with detailed notes about substandard materials and dangerous construction shortcuts. "Your father was a brilliant civil engineer," Maria explains, her voice thick with emotion. "He was hired by Blackwood Engineering 5 years after we got married. Carlos was so proud it was a prestigious company, and the salary would finally let us start a real life together." Rosa nods knowingly. "He was going to buy you that house with the little garden you always wanted. But then Carlos discovered that Richard Blackwood was using inferior steel and concrete in residential buildings to increase profits. Buildings where families would live, where children would sleep." Maria's voice grows stronger with each word. "Your father tried to report it through proper channels first. He filed reports with the company, with the city, with anyone who would listen." Isabella leans forward, completely absorbed. "What happened?" "Richard Blackwood destroyed your father's career and reputation to protect his business. He fired Carlos, claiming he was incompetent and had falsified safety reports. Then Richard made sure no other engineering firm would hire him, spreading lies about Carlos being unstable and dishonest." Maria's eyes fill with tears, but her voice remains steady. The stress of unemployment, the shame of the false accusations, the worry about providing for us, it was too much for Carlos's heart. He had a heart attack while driving to yet another job interview where they'd already been told not to hire him. The doctors said the stress literally killed him. Rosa reaches over to hold Maria's hand. And you never knew who was responsible until today. Maria nods, wiping her tears. I've been working 3 jobs just to keep us afloat. When the Blackwoods hired me 2 years ago, I had no idea Richard was the same man who destroyed Carlos. I needed the work too desperately to ask questions about my employer's full name or history. Isabella examines the documents more closely, her teenage mind sharp and analytical. Mom, why did you keep all this? Why didn't you ever use your degrees to get a better job? Maria's smile is sad, but proud. After Carlos died, no one would believe that a grieving Mexican widow could have graduated from Harvard. I tried for office jobs, but the moment they saw my accent, my skin color, our address, they found reasons not to hire me. The few times I mentioned my education, they assumed I was lying. So you chose dignity over recognition, Rosa says approvingly. I chose survival over pride, Maria corrects. And I wanted you, Isabella, to understand that honest work, any honest work, has value. I may clean houses now, but I've never forgotten how to read financial statements, how to spot discrepancies, how to trace money through complex systems. Isabella is quiet for a long moment, processing everything. Mom, you said Mr. Blackwood mentioned firing an engineer 8 years ago. He was talking about Dad, wasn't he? Maria nods slowly. He knew exactly who I was, Mija. Today's accusation wasn't random racism or classism. It was deliberate revenge against Carlos, carried out against me. The small apartment falls silent as the weight of this revelation settles over the family. Outside, the sounds of their working-class neighborhood continue, children playing, neighbors talking, the distant hum of traffic. But inside, 3 generations of Santos women are realizing that their quiet life of honest struggle is about to become something much more complicated. What are we going to do? Isabella asks quietly. Maria carefully returns the documents to the leather purse, her movements deliberate and thoughtful. I don't know yet, mija. But your father was right about one thing. La verdad siempre sale a la luz. The truth always comes to light. And sometimes, it needs someone brave enough to hold up the lamp. The next morning brings the first wave of Richard's calculated assault on Maria's life. The local news runs a brief segment about a domestic theft incident involving household staff, and though they don't name Maria directly, Richard's influence ensures that everyone in their social and professional circles knows exactly who they're discussing. Margaret Walsh, a kind-hearted widow in her 60s who had employed Maria for weekend cleaning, calls early that morning. Her voice is apologetic but firm. Maria, dear, I'm so sorry, but I simply can't have you working here anymore. Richard Blackwood called me personally last night. He said you stole $50,000 from his safe and that you might be targeting other homes too. Mrs. Walsh, I never took anything from anyone, Maria replies, her heart sinking as she realizes this is just the beginning. I want to believe you. Truly I do. But Richard is threatening to cancel his construction contract with my late husband's company if I continue employing you. That contract keeps 12 families employed, Maria. I can't risk their livelihoods on. Well, on someone I only see a few hours each week. One by one, the phone calls come. The Peterson family, the Johnsons, the Kellys, all delivering the same message with varying degrees of apology and discomfort. By noon, Maria has lost 4 of her 5 regular clients, representing nearly 60% of her income. But Richard isn't finished. He posts a carefully worded message on the neighborhood social media groups. Community Safety Alert. Recently discovered theft in our home by domestic worker. Police investigation ongoing. Recommend all families verify references and conduct thorough background checks. Our children's safety must come first. The post receives dozens of responses within hours, most from other wealthy residents sharing their own concerns about household staff. The rhetoric quickly escalates from caution to outright prejudice, with thinly veiled comments about those people and the need to protect our community values. At Jefferson High School, Isabella faces her own nightmare. The private school, where she attends on a partial scholarship earned through exceptional grades, becomes a battlefield of whispers and stares. Students who never knew her name suddenly avoid her in the hallways, and teachers who once praised her work now seem uncomfortable meeting her eyes. During lunch, Brittany Harrison, daughter of one of Richard's business partners, approaches Isabella's table with a group of friends. "Is it true your mom is a thief?" she asks loudly enough for nearby tables to hear. "My dad says Mr. Blackwood caught her red-handed stealing money." Isabella's face burns with humiliation, but she keeps her voice steady. "My mother didn't steal anything." "That's what they all say," another girl chimes in. "My mom says people like your family come here just to take advantage of Americans who are trying to help." The comments continue throughout the day, each one more cutting than the last. By the time Isabella arrives home, her usual bright spirit is crushed under the weight of her classmates' cruelty. Meanwhile, Dr. Michael Torres, the community clinic physician who has been treating Rosa's heart condition at reduced rates, receives an unexpected visit at his office. Richard Blackwood arrives unannounced, his expensive suit and confident demeanor immediately commanding attention from the clinic staff. "Dr. Torres, I'm Richard Blackwood. I believe you've been treating the grandmother of one of my former household employees, Maria Santos." Dr. Torres, a compassionate man in his 40s who chose community medicine over lucrative private practice, nods cautiously. "I can't discuss patient information, Mr. Blackwood." "Of course not. But I wanted to inform you that Maria Santos is currently under investigation for theft. $50,000 stolen from my home safe. I thought you should know, given that she's likely been paying for her grandmother's care with stolen money." The words hit Dr. Torres like a physical blow. He's grown fond of the Santos family over the past 2 years, impressed by their dignity and gratitude despite their financial struggles. Rosa always brings homemade cookies to her appointments, and Isabella often translates with remarkable maturity. "I'm sure there's been some misunderstanding," Dr. Torres begins. "No misunderstanding," Richard interrupts coldly. "And I'd hate for word to get out that this clinic knowingly accepts stolen money for payment. That could raise questions about your funding sources, couldn't it? The City Council takes these matters very seriously when reviewing community health grants. The threat is subtle, but unmistakable." Dr. Torres feels his stomach turn as he realizes the impossible position he's been placed in. His clinic serves hundreds of low-income families who depend on the grants Richard is threatening. By the end of the week, the pressure has reached a breaking point. Rosa collapses during one of her walks to the grocery store, her heart unable to handle the stress of watching her family being destroyed. The ambulance ride to the emergency room costs money the family doesn't have, and Maria is forced to sell Carlos's wedding ring, the last piece of jewelry she owned, to cover the initial medical expenses. Isabella, overwhelmed by the combination of her grandmother's hospitalization and the social ostracism at school, breaks down completely. "Mom, maybe we should just go back to Mexico," she sobs. "Maybe Brittany's right. Maybe we don't belong here." Maria holds her daughter close, her own heart breaking as she realizes how thoroughly Richard's campaign has succeeded. They're not just losing money and jobs, they're losing hope, dignity, and their sense of belonging in the only country Isabella has ever known as home. The final blow comes when Maria's landlord, Mr. Kenneth Hayes, appears at their door with an eviction notice. His usually friendly demeanor has been replaced by cold professionalism. "Maria, I've received some concerning information about illegal activities in this apartment," he says, refusing to meet her eyes. "I can't risk the reputation of my property or the safety of other tenants. Mr. Hayes, you've known me for 3 years. Have I ever caused any problems? Have I ever been late with rent?" "It's not about what you've done here," he replies uncomfortably. "It's about what you might do. Important people in this community have raised concerns, and I have to protect my business interests." As Maria takes the 30-day eviction notice with shaking hands, she realizes that Richard Blackwood hasn't just accused her of theft. He's orchestrated the complete destruction of her family's life in America. Every bridge has been burned, every support system compromised, every path forward blocked by his influence and wealth. That night, as Rosa sleeps fitfully in her hospital bed and Isabella cries herself to sleep on the couch, Maria sits alone at her kitchen table, staring at the leather purse that contains the remnants of her previous life. For the first time since Carlos's death, she allows herself to feel the full weight of her rage. But instead of despair, something else begins to grow in her chest, a cold, determined fury that reminds her exactly who she used to be before grief and poverty forced her to become invisible. Rosa's weathered hand reaches across the hospital bed to grasp Maria's fingers. Despite the oxygen tube and monitor wires, the elderly woman's grip is surprisingly strong. "Mija," she whispers. "Tu padre always said, la verdad no tem la luz. The truth doesn't fear the light." Maria has been sitting beside the bed for hours, watching her mother-in-law struggle with the heart palpitations brought on by stress and untreated anxiety. The medical bills are mounting. Isabella hasn't spoken in 2 days, and their eviction date looms just 3 weeks away. "I don't know how to fight this, Rosa," Maria admits, her voice barely audible. "He has money, influence, connections. I have nothing." "You have everything Carlos died trying to protect," Rosa replies firmly. "Look in that bag, mija. Really look." With trembling hands, Maria opens the leather purse once more. But this time she examines Carlos's work documents more carefully. Her husband's engineering notes are meticulous, detailed beyond what she initially realized. Page after page documents not just safety violations, but a pattern of systematic fraud that goes far beyond cutting corners on construction materials. Carlos had discovered that Richard Blackwood was operating an elaborate scheme involving multiple shell companies, falsified inspection reports, and bribed city officials. The inferior materials were just the visible tip of a massive iceberg of corruption that had been generating millions in illegal profits. But what makes Maria's blood run cold is a handwritten note dated just 3 days before Carlos's death. "RB threatened me directly today. Said if I continue pursuing this, he'll make sure my family suffers. I'm scared, but I can't let more people die. If something happens to me, Maria must take this to the authorities." Attached to the note is a list of addresses, buildings constructed by Blackwood Engineering using substandard materials. Maria recognizes several of them from newspaper reports over the years. The Harmony Apartments collapse that killed 4 people. The Riverside condos that developed massive structural cracks forcing evacuation. The Sunset Manor senior housing that suffered a partial collapse during a minor earthquake. Isabella appears in the hospital doorway, her face puffy from crying but her expression determined. "Mom, I've been thinking about what Mr. Blackwood said that first day, about firing an engineer 8 years ago. What about it, mija? He knew who you were from the beginning. He hired you on purpose." Isabella's voice grows stronger as she works through her logic. "Think about it, with all his money and connections. Why would he hire someone from our neighborhood? Why would he specifically choose the widow of the man he destroyed?" Maria's eyes widen as the pieces fall into place. "He was planning this from the start." "Exactly. He hired you to set you up. Maybe not the theft specifically, but something. He wanted to humiliate you, to prove that he was right about Dad, about people like us." Rosa nods approvingly from her hospital bed. The child sees clearly. "This was never about $50,000, Mija. This was about finishing what he started with Carlos." Over the next 72 hours, Maria transforms. The defeated cleaning woman disappears, replaced by the Harvard-trained CPA who once analyzed complex financial systems for major corporations. She spreads Carlos's documents across their kitchen table and begins connecting dots that have remained hidden for 8 years. Using her laptop and Isabella's help with online research, Maria discovers that Blackwood Engineering has received over $40 million in city contracts since Carlos's death. Cross-referencing public records with her husband's notes, she finds a pattern of systematic overbilling, material substitutions, and safety violations that would make front-page news if properly exposed. But the breakthrough comes when Maria remembers something Carlos mentioned shortly before his death. Richard kept a personal ledger of his illegal transactions, thinking it was safer than digital records that could be hacked or subpoenaed. "He's old-school paranoid," Carlos had said. Keeps everything important written by hand in a leather journal he carries everywhere. Maria recalls seeing exactly such a journal during her 2 years of cleaning Richard's study. He often left it open on his desk while taking phone calls, and Maria's trained eye had occasionally caught glimpses of numbers and dates that seemed inconsistent with the company's public financial statements. More importantly, she remembers the small camera she installed in her cleaning carts 6 months ago after several clients had accused their housekeepers of minor thefts. The tiny device, barely larger than a button, had been her insurance policy against false accusations. Working feverishly through the night, Maria reviews hundreds of hours of footage from her cleaning sessions at the Blackwood mansion. Most of it is mundane, her methodically dusting and vacuuming, while Richard and his family go about their daily routines. But then she finds it. 47 minutes of Richard Blackwood sitting at his desk, speaking loudly on the phone while writing in his personal ledger. The camera angle isn't perfect, but it's clear enough to read his handwriting as he records cash payments to city inspectors, lists of shell company transfers, and most damning of all, a detailed breakdown of the money he's saved by using substandard materials in low-income housing projects. The final piece of her puzzle clicks into place when Maria discovers that Richard deliberately left his safe open that day, then used his phone to record her closing it. The phone footage shows him removing the money immediately after she left the room, but keeping the recording to use as evidence of her theft. Isabella finds her mother at dawn, surrounded by documents and laptop screens, her eyes bright with the fire of someone who has finally found her weapon. "Mom, you look different." Maria stands up slowly, her posture straighter than it's been in years. "I am different, mija. For 8 years, I've been Maria the grieving widow, Maria the struggling mother, Maria the invisible housekeeper. But today, I remember who I was before grief made me small. Who were you? I was the woman who graduated summa cum laude from Harvard Business School. I was the CPA who exposed financial fraud for Fortune 500 companies. I was the wife of Carlos Santos, and he died fighting for justice." Maria's voice grows stronger with each word. "And today, I'm going to finish what your father started." Isabella smiles for the first time in weeks. "What do we do first?" "We call a press conference, but not to defend ourselves, to attack." Maria Santos stands before the modest crowd of local reporters, community members, and curious onlookers gathered in the Jefferson Community Center's main hall. Gone is the nervous, defensive woman who was accused of theft 2 weeks ago. In her place stands someone radiating quiet confidence and controlled fury, her posture erect, her voice clear and strong. She's dressed simply but professionally in her best dark blue dress, her hair pulled back neatly, and she carries that worn leather purse with the dignity of someone bearing sacred artifacts. Beside her stands Sarah Goldman, a sharp-eyed attorney in her 50s who specializes in whistleblower cases and has agreed to represent Maria pro bono after reviewing the evidence. Margaret Walsh sits in the front row despite Richard's threats, her conscience having finally overridden her fear. Doctor. Michael Torres is also present, having closed his clinic for the afternoon to witness what he suspects will be a historic moment of truth. Richard Blackwood enters the room with his characteristic arrogance, flanked by his own attorney and followed by Sarah and David. He's clearly expecting this to be Maria's public apology, or perhaps a desperate attempt to negotiate some kind of settlement. His smirk suggests he views this gathering as proof of his complete victory. "Ladies and gentlemen," Maria begins, her voice carrying clearly through the room without need for a microphone. "My name is Maria Elena Santos. 2 weeks ago, Richard Blackwood accused me of stealing $50,000 from his home safe. Today, I'm here to discuss a much larger theft, one that has cost lives, destroyed families, and corrupted the very foundations of our community's safety." A murmur runs through the crowd. Richard's smirk falters slightly as he realizes this isn't going according to his expectations. "I am not here as a victim," Maria continues, her tone growing stronger. "I am here as the widow of Carlos Santos, a brilliant civil engineer who died 8 years ago, trying to expose the criminal activities of Blackwood Engineering. I am here as a Harvard-educated CPA who has spent the last 2 weeks analyzing financial records that reveal systematic fraud, bribery, and willful endangerment of human life. She pauses to let this information sink in, watching as reporters begin frantically taking notes and several audience members lean forward in their seats. Mr. Blackwood didn't hire me randomly 2 years ago. He knew exactly who I was, the wife of the engineer he destroyed for trying to tell the truth. He hired me as part of a calculated plan to humiliate me and, through me, posthumously vindicate his destruction of my husband's reputation. Richard jumps to his feet, his face flushed with anger. This is ridiculous. She's a thief trying to distract from her crimes with wild conspiracy theories. Maria turns to face him directly, her dark eyes blazing with controlled fury. Mr. Blackwood, thank you for confirming something I've wondered about. You do remember my husband Carlos very well, don't you? I remember firing a lying, incompetent engineer who was trying to sabotage my company with false accusations. Richard snarls. Carlos Santos wasn't lying, Maria states flatly, and I can prove it. She opens her leather purse and withdraws Carlos's meticulously documented files. These are my late husband's engineering reports, filed with Blackwood Engineering between 2015 and 2017. They detail the use of substandard steel, inferior concrete, and falsified safety inspections in at least 12 residential construction projects. Sarah Goldman steps forward with a projection screen and laptop. Mrs. Santos, would you please show the audience what happened to those buildings? The first image appears on screen. The collapsed Harmony Apartments, a pile of rubble surrounded by emergency vehicles. 4 people died in this collapse, Maria states matter-of-factly, including an 8-year-old girl named Sophie Martinez and her grandmother Elena. The next image shows the severely damaged Riverside condos. 47 families were displaced when this building developed massive structural cracks. The city condemned it as uninhabitable after just 3 years. With each new image, Maria's voice grows more controlled, more devastating. Sunset Manor senior housing partial collapse during a minor earthquake. Oak Street family complex water damage from faulty construction led to black mold that hospitalized 11 children. The room has fallen completely silent except for the rapid clicking of cameras and scratching of pens on paper. Richard's attorney is frantically whispering in his ear, but Richard himself seems frozen, his face growing pale as the presentation continues. But here's what my husband discovered that really terrified Richard Blackwood, Maria continues, advancing to the next slide. This wasn't just negligence or corner-cutting to save money. This was a systematic scheme to defraud the city of Philadelphia out of millions of dollars while knowingly putting families at risk. The screen now shows a complex chart connecting shell companies, bank accounts, and city contracts. Blackwood Engineering created 17 different subsidiary companies to bid against each other for city projects, creating the illusion of competitive pricing while actually guaranteeing that Mr. Blackwood would win every contract. Gasps ripple through the audience as the scope of the fraud becomes clear. The city paid for grade A materials and construction, but received substandard work that was sometimes literally dangerous to inhabit. The difference, over $43 million over 8 years, went directly into Mr. Blackwood's personal accounts and those of the city officials he bribed to look the other way. Richard finally finds his voice, but it comes out as a desperate shout. "Where's your proof? Anyone can make charts and wild accusations." Maria smiles coldly. "I'm so glad you asked." Sarah Goldman advances to the next slide, which shows a clear photograph of Richard's handwritten ledger, open to a page detailing cash payments to various city officials. This photograph was taken in Mr. Blackwood's study on the 15th of March of this year, while I was performing my duties as his housekeeper. The room erupts in shocked whispers as people lean forward to read the damning entries in Richard's own handwriting. "But wait," Maria continues, raising her voice to regain attention. "There's more. Mr. Blackwood, you mentioned that you caught me stealing $50,000 from your safe. Would you like to show everyone that evidence?" Richard's mouth opens and closes wordlessly. His attorney grabs his arm, clearly trying to get him to stop talking, but Richard's arrogance overrides his judgment. I have video of her taking the money," he stammers. "Actually, You have video of me closing your safe after I found it standing wide open, Maria corrects. But you also have video of yourself removing that money after I left the room and hiding it in your desk drawer to frame me. Would you like me to show your video alongside mine? The color drains completely from Richard's face as he realizes the trap he's walked into. You see, Maria continues, her voice now carrying the full authority of her education and righteous anger, I've been recording my cleaning sessions for months as protection against exactly this type of false accusation. Your own security cameras captured you deliberately leaving the safe open, filming me closing it, and then removing the money yourself. She advances to the final slide. A split-screen comparison showing Richard's phone footage alongside her hidden camera footage, with timestamps proving the sequence of events. You didn't just try to frame me for theft, Mr. Blackwood. You murdered my husband through systematic harassment and character assassination, then spent 2 years planning an elaborate revenge against his widow. But, in your arrogance, you underestimated exactly who you were dealing with. Maria steps forward, her voice dropping to a whisper that somehow carries to every corner of the room. I am not just a housekeeper, Mr. Blackwood. I am a Harvard-educated CPA with expertise in forensic accounting. I am the widow of the most ethical man I ever knew. And I am a mother who will not let her daughter grow up in a world where men like you can destroy innocent families without consequences. She turns to address the crowd, her voice rising with passionate conviction. Carlos Santos died, trying to protect this community from a predator who valued profit over human life. Today, I finish what my husband started. Today, the truth finally comes to light. The community center erupts in applause as Richard Blackwood sinks into his chair, his empire of lies crumbling around him in real time. The aftermath of Maria's revelation spreads through Philadelphia like wildfire. Within hours, the video clips and financial documents are trending on social media, picked up by major news networks, and prompting emergency meetings in City Hall. But Maria Santos isn't interested in becoming a celebrity or media darling. She has more important work to do. 3 weeks later, on a crisp autumn morning, Maria unlocks the door to a small office space in the heart of the Latino community where she grew up. The sign on the window reads Santos Community Financial Services in both English and Spanish, with smaller text below. Honest advice for working families. The office is modest but welcoming, with comfortable chairs, bilingual financial literacy posters on the walls, and a photo of Carlos prominently displayed on Maria's desk. Isabella, whose grades have returned to their previous excellence after the stress lifted, helps organize files and translate documents during her after-school hours. Mrs. Santos calls Patricia Morales, a young mother holding her toddler's hand. I got the letter from the IRS like you said I would. They found the mistake, and I'm getting back the refund they owed me. Maria smiles, looking up from the tax forms she's reviewing for another client. That's wonderful, Patricia. Remember, you have rights as a taxpayer, and you should never be afraid to ask questions when something doesn't seem right. This scene repeats throughout the day, families who had been intimidated by complex financial systems now finding their voices and claiming their rightful benefits, tax refunds, and legal protections. Maria charges what people can afford, sometimes accepting payment in the form of homemade meals or help with office cleaning. Dr. Michael Torres stops by during his lunch break, as he has every Wednesday since Richard's arrest. How's Rosa doing with her new medication? Much better, Maria replies warmly. Her heart rate has stabilized completely now that the stress is gone. She's even talking about volunteering at the community center to teach English literacy. And the Blackwood situation? Maria's expression grows more serious. Richard pled guilty to avoid a trial. He's facing 15 years federal prison for fraud, bribery, and tax evasion. His company has been dissolved, and all his assets are being liquidated to pay restitution to the families affected by his buildings. What about Sarah and David? Sarah filed for divorce the day after the press conference. She's actually been helpful with the federal investigation, apparently. She had suspected something was wrong for years but was too afraid to speak up. David transferred to a different college and is considering studying social work. Isabella looks up from her homework at a corner desk. Mom, Mrs. Goldman called. She says 3 more cities want to hire you as a consultant to review their construction contracts for fraud. Maria considers this carefully. Tell her I'll think about it. But I don't want to travel too much. Our community here needs this service more than I need a bigger reputation. As the afternoon progresses, Margaret Walsh arrives with a surprise visitor, a nervous-looking young woman with dark skin and calloused hands who clutches a folder of documents. Maria, Margaret says, this is Aisha Okafor. She works as a home health aide for several families, and she's been accused of stealing medications. Aisha's story is depressingly familiar. A wealthy family discovered missing prescription drugs and immediately blamed their Nigerian caregiver, despite having no evidence beyond racial prejudice and class assumptions. The family has hired private investigators and threatened deportation proceedings. I didn't take anything, Aisha says quietly, her accent thick with fear and exhaustion. I have been working in America for 6 years, sending money to my children in Lagos. I would never steal from the people I care for. Maria studies the documents Aisha has brought, her trained eye immediately spotting inconsistencies in the family's accusations. More importantly, she recognizes the same pattern of systematic harassment and character assassination that Richard used against her and Carlos. Aisha, Maria says gently, how long have you been working for this family? 2 years, since just after Mrs. Coleman's mother moved in with them. And when did the medications start going missing? They say 3 months ago, but Mrs. Coleman's mother has Alzheimer's disease. Sometimes she forgets she has already taken her pills and takes more, or she hides them because she's confused. Maria nods, making notes on a legal pad. Have they considered that explanation? No. They say it's impossible. They say people like me come to America just to steal and take advantage. Isabella looks up from her homework, her young face showing the same determination that drives her mother. It's happening again, isn't it, Mom? Yes, mija, it is. But this time, we know how to fight back. Maria stands and walks around her desk to sit directly across from Aisha. I want you to know something important. You are not alone, you are not powerless, and you are not going to let them destroy you the way they destroyed others. But I don't have money for lawyers. I don't have education like you. You have something more powerful than that, Maria interrupts. You have the truth, and truth, combined with someone willing to fight for it, can defeat any lie. Over the next 2 hours, Maria and Isabella work with Aisha to organize her documentation, identify witnesses who can testify to her character, and develop a strategy for confronting her accusers. More importantly, they connect her with Sarah Goldman's legal clinic and Dr. Torres, who agrees to provide expert testimony about Alzheimer's medication management. As the sun sets over the city, Maria locks up her office and walks home with Isabella, both of them tired but satisfied with the day's work. Mom, Isabella says as they walk, do you ever miss the old life? Before Dad died, when you had the fancy job and the house in the suburbs? Maria considers the question carefully. I miss your father every day, mija. And I'll always regret that we lost so many years when I was too afraid to use my skills to help people. But I don't miss being someone who only helped rich corporations get richer. Do you think Dad would be proud of what we're doing now? I think, Maria says, pulling her daughter close as they walk, that your father is finally at rest because his work is being finished. They pause at their apartment building, not the cramped space they nearly lost, but a larger apartment Margaret Walsh helped them find when the restitution money came through. Rosa is visible through the window, preparing dinner and humming an old Mexican song. Isabella, do you remember what Abuela always says about dignity? La dignidad no se compra con dinero. Dignity cannot be bought with money. That's right, but she taught me something else too. La justicia necesita manos que trabajen. Justice needs hands that work. For too long, I thought justice was something that happened to other people. For other people. Now I know that justice is something we create, one case at a time, one family at a time. As they climb the stairs to their apartment, Isabella asks one final question. Mom, what would you tell other people who are facing what we faced? Maria pauses on the landing, her hand on the doorknob, and turns to look at her daughter, this brilliant, resilient young woman who has grown so much stronger through their ordeal. I would tell them that the people who try to make you feel small and powerless are counting on your silence. They're counting on your fear, your shame, your belief that you don't deserve better. But the moment you refuse to be silent, the moment you stand up and say, I matter, my family matters, my truth matters, that's the moment their power begins to crumble. And if they don't think they're strong enough to fight, then I tell them they're not fighting alone. There are people like us, like Dr. Torres, like Mrs. Goldman, like Mrs. Walsh, people who believe that everyone deserves dignity and justice, regardless of their accent, their address, or the size of their bank account. Maria opens the door to the warm smell of Rose's cooking and the sound of her gentle laughter. Isabella heads straight to her homework, but Maria pauses to look at the framed photo of Carlos that now sits prominently on their mantelpiece. We did it, mi amor, she whispers. La verdad salió a la luz. The truth came to light. Outside their window, the city continues its endless rhythm of struggle and hope, injustice and resistance. Tomorrow will bring new families seeking help, new cases of the powerful preying on the vulnerable, new opportunities to choose between silence and courage. But tonight, in a small apartment filled with love and the quiet satisfaction of meaningful work, 3 generations of Santos women sit down to dinner, knowing that they have transformed their pain into purpose, their grief into power, and their silence into a voice that can no longer be ignored. The legacy of Carlos Santos lives on not in the buildings that could have been built with integrity, but in the lives that continue to be saved by the courage of those who refuse to let truth remain buried in darkness. And somewhere in the city, another family facing impossible odds will hear Maria's story and realize that they too have the power to fight back, to stand up, to insist that their dignity and their truth matter just as much as anyone else's. The light that Carlos died trying to shine has finally illuminated the darkness, and it will never be extinguished again.